So Analytic Partners is celebrating 20 years. And now the thing is that I recall talking about big data and a lot of things around data 10 years ago. So you have to remember here now Analytic Partners has an extra decade under their belt. So you know they got to know a heck of a lot of stuff. So please go check them out and learn more about them. And I'd like to welcome to the stage Mike Menkes, SVP of Analytic Partners, with our next guest. Take it away, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Doug, for that very warm welcome. Yes, Analytic Partners is indeed celebrating its 20-year anniversary. We're very excited about that. And I'm very excited to introduce Brian Gill, who is my partner in crime at SharkNinja. And Brian is the Director of Global Media Strategy and Planning at SharkNinja. And so he's going to be joining me today to talk a little bit about what we've been doing with analytics within the organization and how we've been able to drive success through data-driven decisioning. So really exciting story to talk about here today. And welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Mike.
Great.
Before we go ahead and get into the details of what Mike just mentioned, we wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to be data-driven and how that kind of means different things to different people a lot of the time. And we mentioned a little bit earlier, big data came around quite a few years ago, and how people have approached big data has certainly taken on many faces. So what I kind of noticed when I was talking with Mike and colleagues across the industries is there's a kind of a recurring phrase that comes up when we talk about being data-driven, the path of follow the data. And that phrase can be a little dangerous or detrimental to a program because it's really the context and the insights that are key and not just the data itself. And you'll see what we mean when we get a little bit further. And it may sound like semantics in some ways. So at the risk of being a little too literal, I wanted to kind of ground us in a universal truth that we can all relate to. We all know the feeling of getting into a cab. When we call an Uber, we all share that same experience. And there's always a similar, very first, most important question that gets asked. And that question is not what street did you go down yesterday? And it's not how far or how fast do you want to drive today? And I really hope for a lot of you, it's not just how much money do you have? The real question that always gets asked right at the start is where do you want to go? And that may sound silly and oversimplified in many ways. And it's really true. Where do you want to go is a very empowering question, because we often fail at taking a data-driven approach when we misinterpret the role of data and what it should be used for. Because just like a taxi driver, they can't pick your destination for you. They can't tell you where you want to go, but they can recommend the best ways to get there and give you the best paths forward to get you where you want to go. And I bring this up because a few years ago, where our journey started, SharkNinja was falling into a very similar trap. And knowing that there was a more sophisticated approach to our media and marketing out there, we wanted to take, we just didn't know what that was. We hadn't put on paper where our destination was. And so we wanted to innovate our media strategy as aggressively as we innovate our products, which it's definitely hard to keep up with our product development team. But innovating media strategy was difficult because a lot of stakeholders had different interpretations of what that means and what does innovating media really, what is that destination and the outcome of that? So in working with Mike's team, we were able to distill that destination into a very large question and objective, but it's robust and very clear at the same time. And so we wanted to evolve our marketing mix to more efficiently support a growing portfolio of products across a lot of different categories. We wanted to drive sales for our direct-to-consumer business as well as our retail partners and capitalize on early media landscape changes with kind of that really quick test and learn approach, taking advantage of a lot of the change we've been seeing over the last 5 years, leaning into opportunities with partners. We saw those as our big keys for success in our analytics path forward. And so when we take that and we fast forward now a few years to where we were ending up on our journey, we can see that we're well on our way towards what that destination is. And I'll be the first to say we'll never get to that destination. It is definitely a journey, but the goalposts will keep moving and we will keep striving forward in this path because all of those principles still remain true to our destination. Over the past few years, we've seen tremendous growth in our overall media ROI. We've been able to double budgets while almost doubling the total impact of our media effectiveness on driving sales. And it's truly through this partnership with Mike's team that we've been able to kind of create a great formula around what our analytics path forward is, but also continue to disrupt our own processes in the meantime to identify where can we innovate our media approach, because what the innovation was 2 years ago for us is not the innovation we're going to be talking about today. So, Mike, curious, looking back to when we started this journey, when SharkNinja kind of came knocking at your door, how was your team able to get us on the right track, knowing we had ambitions, but maybe not that clear destination?
Yeah, no, it's it's been a great journey, and I think you summed it up well. Certainly, analytics is definitely a journey. We've seen that with SharkNinja. I know we're going to talk a little bit about what's made us successful so far, but it might be good to also kind of reflect and take a step back and rewind a little bit to talk about the early days. I think when we started working with SharkNinja, there was a fair amount of skepticism with some of the insights and results that we were sharing. So, you know, we worked with Brian and his team to basically address those questions. So we did a fair amount of myth busting around, you know, easily tracked metrics and moving from kind of late and last touch measurement to more incrementality measurement to take into account direct and indirect effects. Test and learn is really crucial to making sure that any analytic program is successful too. So SharkNinja has been great about this and very innovative, not only with their products, but also the way that they go to market and their strategy, constantly testing and learning to help grow the impact of different types of marketing efforts and non-marketing efforts for that matter. Testing and growing to grow sales and even just the confidence in the analytics itself. So over time, as we execute new things and we're able to validate and confirm some of the recommendations and insights we've generated, it drives a lot more confidence in the analytics program itself. So we've kind of gone from, you know, 4 or 5 years ago from kind of having some raised eyebrows in those meetings with the C-level executives to those same folks asking, hey, what does the commercial mix modeling analysis say? What does Analytic Partners have to say to complement some of the other insights and research they have? So, and now we're using the analytics in lockstep with the goal setting as well. So tying the analytics to the goals. So, so it's been a really exciting journey. I think there's a number of topics that we'll talk about now that I think were really game changers for the program. Brian, I know you and I talked a little bit about some of those areas. So if you want to kick off, I know like collaboration was a big one, cross-functional and agency collaboration. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
You're absolutely right. It's something that we've found somehow really successful within SharkNinja's culture. By enrolling all of our subject matter experts in this process, that challenge of adoption in analytics that a lot of people face has somehow happened over a long period of time, but at the same time, all at once, it seems. I can't really identify that moment that change started happening, but by just even collaborating and bringing in analytics to the forefront of the planning process, trying to include all of those secondary and tertiary goals, not just our overall objective, but there were a lot of kind of pit stops along the way that we wanted to meet and make sure we were satisfying all the business criteria, because those raised eyebrows definitely come about when we put forth a great piece of data and insight and like, here's what we really recommend going to do, but we didn't take this list of other business considerations into effect. So I think that has been part of the secret sauce here in moving the ball forward. It's never going to be as far down the field as we want it to be, but I think it's been a really good start, and the test and learn structures we've set up have been impactful. Probably a personal pet peeve on test and learn is when people kind of raise their hands and say like, oh, well, let's just test it and see what happens. I think we all understand that testing isn't just a what happens type of thing. We want to have those regimens in place and understanding and learning models to say, what does a successful test look like? And for me, being able to work with you on how can we fill this test into our modeling so that we don't just have the channel insight, but we have the holistic insight as well, has been completely game changing for us.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think we've got a slide on that a little bit later, but really making sure when we do these test and learns that we're taking a holistic understanding of the impact. So controlling for some activities in a simplistic kind of A/B test scenario, there's going to be contamination, and we want to make sure that we remove that contamination when we assess the test and learn, which we can do through different techniques and solutions like agile learning that we have. But fundamentally, it's really about making sure that we have a rigorous test and learn in place to be able to look into that. And the omnichannel dynamics are important too, because some of the things that we are testing and the impacts we have are naturally going to over-index on some portions of the business and under-index on others, and that's okay. We just have to know that going into the test and be able to capture that dynamic. So making sure we aren't using siloed analytics. So just, for example, we can't just look at online conversion or online traffic, because there's offline elements as well that we need to take into account, and recognizing that some channels are more designed to drive online and others that are more designed to drive offline, and being aware of that. So
I think my favorite thing that we went through in the test and learn programs is just how to afford the level of risk that people associate with tests. I think I've talked to a lot of people, and one of their favorite things is everyone wants to take the big risks. And as much as, internally I'd love to say we're big risk takers, I think really we're big risk afforders. And how do I work into my media plans like this scale of test that the payoff, if this is successful, really is game changing for us and reevaluates our mix completely. But if that test fails, there's no downside. And we can understand how to balance those two things and afford to take on a certain amount of risk in the media plans. That's probably my favorite part of the collaboration we've had between us and the agency planning team as well.
Yeah, agreed. And I think one of the things we've also been pretty successful with the SharkNinja and Analytic partners partnering together on is also leveraging the analytics to be very forward-looking. So we need to be thinking about certainly, understanding what's happened and what's working now and today, but doing so in light of what the future is going to hold. So obviously there's a lot of unknowns in the future, but we can help provide insight into what the possible futures may hold and be prepared for, things like the rise of OTT and what things we want to consider in the mix, knowing what we have seen be effective for the business in the past and extrapolating that into the future by leveraging a variety of different data points.
Yeah, and to that point of just where we started the journey, if you had recommended, the type of programs we're talking about now back those couple of years ago when we were getting started, would have been the wrong tool for the wrong job. Like we needed to foundational understanding things and evolve from there. So I think similarly, which is like finding our way to that destination, like the evolution of the analytics program itself really speaks to the evolution of what we had an appetite for in terms of our media executions too.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I think might be worth exploring is, and it's kind of related to what we were talking about with the direct and indirect effects, but multiple objectives and KPIs. So one of the things that we've leaned into in the past couple of years, and obviously a big part of today, is making sure that we're optimizing across different KPIs. So sales is obviously a big one, but there's other elements that we need to keep in mind, such as, how do we balance across the portfolio? How do we drive success for our retail partners as well as our DTC business? So I don't know, Brian, if you want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I'm sure we all struggle with a lot of goals, and for those who operate in specific digital media channels, it's always fun when someone gives you 3 KPIs for a campaign and you can't optimize that way. That's not what that's built for. But in this world, we can really take into account those holistic impacts and really try to satisfy the multiple criteria, because there will always be an optimization for us that looks very clear. Like move A to B because it could be worth this much to you. But the reasons why A is a certain way has to be taken into account. And that was part of the change management process we had to go through, was seeing that holistic business case for the way things were before we can make those recommendations. Really getting the analytics ingrained in the holistic business strategy, not just the media strategy, was really important too.
Yeah, and another element that I think was a big learning was just the concept of portfolio planning as well. And so making decisions that are going to be beneficial for a specific product line or specific business, but also that we're driving the portfolio as a whole. So when we think about, the product lineup of different types of Shark products, we've got robotics and uprights and things like that, but making sure that we're providing guidance and having conversations around positive ways to grow different portions of the business and ways that we can leverage that.
Yeah, especially with the growth across product lines, it's really hard to find media executions that don't step on each other's toes. So finding where those efficiencies can be had across the portfolio has been huge for us.
Yeah. Halo, for example, we know Halo, when we advertise one product and it affects other products within the portfolio, is a huge driver of performance, not only for SharkNinja, but something that we know from our ROI genome research is consistent across businesses. And it's generally about half of the impact of the advertising is halo onto other portions of the business. So huge factor. The other one that I find was really interesting and I think representative of analytics as a journey as a whole is the concept of continuity of the program. So having the confidence and the structure in place to have this kind of source of truth on an ongoing basis, which helps a lot with transitioning new team members on, new brand managers, and onboarding different portions of the business. It can become this kind of foundation of learning that we can build from.
Yeah, we just did it the other day with your team and kind of re-onboarding a lot of people who have come into the business over the past year who have not seen our full process yet, and being able to almost teach them about how well the business works in these different ways and have you as a strategic partner in that lens as well, as opposed to just using the outputs in each discipline, has also been a really big driver. I think some of your the other analytic partners clients that we've talked to over the years, having that longevity and seeing the trends change over time and tracking those against overall marketplace changes and trends has just been really key, because testing with a different partner or something year over year, you don't have that baseline. Being able to tell the whole story has been really key, because what would have worked last year didn't work 3 years ago too. That's not an isolated view anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. So Brian, I'm going to reshare my screen. It looks like this came off for a second, but it's probably better for, I know we were having a little conversation here as well. So I know we've got a couple minutes left. I wanted to just take a few moments, and Brian, feel free to jump in and add any builds here, showcasing some of the learnings. And I think one of the things that we wanted to highlight is that, there are some mega learnings and strategic learnings. We've highlighted some of them here. So for SharkNinja, things like marketing is indeed fundamental to driving sales growth. That's a principle that, obviously we established a few years ago, but it remains to be true. And it's something we need to continue to keep in mind. Digital opportunities, the fact that all media has an omnichannel impact is also very important, but that each behave differently. That was a really interesting and important element that actually set the strategy and changes the strategy that we had at SharkNinja. And then for SharkNinja, and this is true generally speaking as well, mega brand and overarching equity advertising tends to drive higher ROIs and more cross-product halo. So these are some of the high-level insights that we had. But I think it's important to keep in mind, and I think many folks in the audience are probably familiar with this, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg. So a lot of times with analytics, it's tend to view as, well, what are the ROIs and where can we optimize? Where should we put our dollars? Obviously, it helps with those sorts of things, but there's so many detailed insights under the surface that we also bring to the table through the analytics, because the journey itself allows us to ask some of those questions, which Brian did a great job of explaining. We need to understand what the destination is, but then answers to those questions create more questions. So then we want to know more and dive in deeper into different types of channels, different types of product lines. What does this look like for different countries, those sorts of things. So we've just got some examples here, but I think fundamentally that's a concept that we see consistently, is that there's always so much more to learn, and that the marketplace is always constantly changing as well.
Yeah, I think these insights themselves were great, but the idea that they open up all these new questions, it kind of goes back to the idea that we could have challenged your team to say, we want to invest more in digital, like how do we do that and where should we do that? And you can answer that question. But by enrolling you in the business objective and long-term challenge of where we want to go, it opened up all of these doors to kind of keep exploring these different areas and didn't feel so narrow to a particular challenge. So I think even just cross-functionally objective setting with you has been helpful for us to really unlock the power of using analytics in the right way.
Yeah, and just one other example that we wanted to showcase before we transition over to the key takeaways is just understanding that omni-channel impact. So we've got, this is actual data, obviously blinded a little bit here in terms of, when we advertise or support our business behind different types of marketing and promotion areas, it does have a substantially different impact onto different portions of the business. So we're looking at, when we advertise on, whether it's TV or different types of digital properties or different types of social platforms, what's the impact onto our retail business versus our DTC business? And this is important for a lot of brands that are leveraging DTC data. We do need to make sure we take into account that retail element as well, because it is rather large for many businesses and will tell a very different story. So that holistic measurement becomes important. So just an example of something we wanted to dig into. And then of course, think of this as, the impact across different channels, but also then think of it from the different types of products that we have to support as well.
And this one's hard, right? Like this is hard when you have data available on a weekly basis and to optimize into that. To keep that holistic perspective, it is just, we found such good hygiene to do this routinely and as a reminder, because it's true, like we can definitely optimize into short-term things at the expense of longer-term business objectives. So this kind of view, it's really helped ground our team and our executive leadership team in why we're doing some of the things that we're doing and where we can recognize that impact, especially not being overreactive to week fluctuations as much as we do want to be data driven.
Great. So I think Brian really captured some of these key insights that we highlighted. Significant growth, virtually doubling the ROI in just a couple of years, which is pretty spectacular. So again, just to reinforce the point, analytics is a journey. There is continuous benefit from doing it and learning from it. And I think SharkNinja has been really harnessing this type of analytics and way of thinking really well. And it's really led to significant growth, which has been exciting to be a part of. So thanks, Brian. And I guess I'll pass it back to Doug at Adweek. I think you have some questions.
Well, wait a second. Do you recognize this? Hold on. Is it not showing up? It's from our blender. It's from our new. Sorry. This is. So, sorry. It's like it's getting washed out, but there we go.
SharkNinja blender.
Yeah, there we go. There you go. One for the home team. We have some key takeaways. So if you want to roll through those real quick, that would be lovely.
Sure. Brian, you want to?
Sure. So I think the main thing here that Mike and I have discussed is really, it's important to know our destinations to really get the most out of data analytics and to align those analytics to achieve those goals. We can't stress it enough that it is a journey and not just one singular question.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. And then just that second point there, a rigorous test and learn program is really critical for success. And I think part of that is being intentionally curious, thinking about what the future may hold, what do we want to test, what things may change, and we can test that and measure that within an analytics program, and making sure that we measure holistically so that we're making the right decisions based upon the holistic impact on the business.
Makes sense. Thank you, gentlemen. Mike, I want you to stay for 1 second, please.
Sure.
Brian, you are free to go, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for the blender. We love it. I don't have the blades in there, but it's probably better they're not. But Mike, I want to thank you and Analytic Partners for your partnership today. I've been asking weird questions of our partners. What is the one piece of data that may be a little not talked about a lot that brands should understand more of in 2021? Is there one little thing that's sort of sitting in there that's we've got sort of the macro, we're getting down into the, we're getting it down the funnel a little bit, but there's, there was, people have said, first point, last point. So I'm curious, is there one sort of piece of data that people aren't necessarily thinking about that they should be thinking about?
Great question. I'd say, I don't know if this is a piece of a data, but a concept, which is
okay. Make it quick.
Yeah, offline. I think there's a big focus on online performance, which is the right way to be thinking about it. But to be only thinking about online is missing a significant portion of the reality of the world that we live in. And yes, we're all at home for the most part, and much of the shopping is online, but offline is, both in terms of behaviors and sales, and depending on your business is hugely valuable. So don't focus too much on just the online portion.
Yep, that makes sense. Mike Menkes, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you very much for your partnership and Analytic Partners. Good luck, and we'll see you around.